Kaya sini kaya.
What's going on now in Rakhine State is a very serious armed conflict.
The conflict that's been going on between the Arakan army and the Myanmar military has blown up in the past year and a half.
The Tatmadaw has thrown everything at it. All three services, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force are involved.
We've seen pitched battles, heavy artillery, airstrikes, this incredibly violent response on the part of the Myanmar military to crush the Arakan army, which has had a major impact on the civilian population. By some estimates, 160,000, mostly Rakhine people who have been displaced, and reports of hundreds of civilians being killed in this fighting.
After all the years of fighting the Tatmadaw, they have been adopting Tatmadaw tactics. I don't mean to paint them as the heroes, because they certainly aren't.
The thing about the Arakan army is that they're a relatively unique new insurgency in a country which has dealt with insurgency for more than 70 years. Very well-trained soldiers. Their leadership is well-educated, relatively cosmopolitan. They're not kind of hill-dwelling peasants who have revolted against central rule. These are pretty sophisticated young people.
They are probably more capable than some of the other armed forces. They're certainly more strategically organized. It's guerrilla tactics. All of these wars are guerrilla tactics. It's not an organized battle between battalions. If you look at the pattern of conflict between the Arakan army and the Tatmadaw in Rakhine State, you'll see that it follows along the main roads. So clearly they are operating in heavily populated areas along the main roads.
On the 4th of January 2019, there were these dramatic attacks against police stations, and then it just started exploding. The Myanmar military response was overwhelming firepower. And so I think the last year and a half has really been this crucible of this conflict that comes from very long-standing grievances. And it is, I think, compared to all the other conflict zones in Myanmar, the most intense and impactful right now. The Rakhine is not very well developed, mostly through the neglect of the central government. It feels a little bit kind of cut off, even though it's connected. Basically, you've got this closed-in coastal line with a mountain range, and there's really just kind of one main road and arterial roads, and then the river, the Kalanan River and another river. It's a very swampy kind of riverine environment in which the central government and the colonial authorities largely ignored them for 200 years. And I think that's where a lot of the grievances are coming from in support for the Arakan army. It's like, you left us behind, and you don't recognize our historical greatness. And it's that lack of historical and contemporary respect that I think really drives support for the Arakan army. They were an independent kingdom. It's almost like this once were warriors idea of like, we had our own kingdom, we had our own respect, and you Burmans, you took it away from us.
A century ago, there was something called the Arakan Empire. Its capital was in Raul, in that area. So they have always been trying to restore their ethnic identity, and that's part of the mission of the Arakan army, is restoring the original Arakan Empire. Well, I think the video speaks for itself. It really is a very clear picture of Tatmadaw tactics. At first, they tried to claim it was the AA that was doing it, but in fact, it was clearly the Navy, because they were on a Navy boat. The culture of the Tatmadaw is toxic. These guys are trained to do that. They're not born to do it. And somebody has to create that culture. So it's the leadership of the organization that creates that culture. The members of the Tatmadaw that were doing this have now been arrested and are supposedly being investigated and eventually tried. But we'll see, because often these things just get lost along the way. The Tatmadaw pretends they're doing something about it, and then they don't.
အမျိုးဘာသာသာသနာကိုလေးမထောက်အော်လူမင်းလာပဲတော့စီဘူးဒီမူရတီလေထွန်ဖို့ထော်ရင်ပြီးကြီး
The real answer would be to bring some kind of negotiation, some kind of discussion into political channels. Right now it's not possible because of all the fighting.
My view is we don't know where this is going. We know that right now it's incredibly violent, incredibly destructive, and incredibly divisive. I think with all the killing, the displacement, the atrocities, the resentment, the dead soldiers, I mean, all of this just bodes to me more extremism.